Now to the Washington Post reporting we've been talking about this morning that some of Donald Trump's most loyal allies were working day and night leading up to the January 6th attack of the Capitol. And they gathered at the Willard Hotel, which is, of course, just a block from the White House. They called it, quote, the command center. Among the group, Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, former chief White House staff strategist Steve Bannon, and John Eastman, that attorney who's considered one of the key architects of Trump's efforts to overturn the election results. Let's bring in right now Pulitzer Prize-winning associate editor of the Washington Post, Bob Woodward, and political reporter for the Washington Post, Robert Costa. They are co-authors of the book Peril. Bob Woodward, my God, you've seen a lot in Washington, D.C. before, but just, again, reading through what happened the night before this insurrection against the United States government is so chilling, and it shows just how premeditated that attack was.
Yes, it was all planned out in a key way. We found December 30th. This is a week before January 6th, before the insurrection. Steve Bannon and Trump are talking on the phone, and Bannon is just stirring Trump up, saying, "You've got to come back. This is the day of reckoning in a week. We need to get Pence involved here. We need to get him off the effing ski slopes where they stashed him away." And it's very active, and you start interlacing this with what happened at the Willard Hotel that night, January 5th. I mean, my colleague Costa, who always has the news nose, was there that night.
Well, I was outside in the whole scene.
The reporter.
Banging on the door.
To this day, I wish I had banged a little harder on that door because it was a freezing cold night, and I was roaming around. And it was, I still remember, we talked about it as we were writing, because we didn't know, when you write a book, it takes months to understand the context of what's happening, what actually happened. But that night was eerie because we didn't know at the time that Trump's over at the White House pounding into Pence in the one-on-one Oval Office meeting. And then after it doesn't go well for Trump, he calls in to the Willard War Room. And this is the key thing we found for Peril. That it's not just a Willard War Room happening in an isolated way across the street. The president is calling in. Trump's calling in. He's coordinating this effort to speak for Pence. Remember, late at night, as you detailed earlier, Trump's issuing a statement saying Pence agrees with me. He's effectively taking over the vice presidency, at least in terms of the public message. And this is all just hours before the insurrection.
Yeah, and this is building a mechanism, Bob Woodward, for this attack and assault on the Capitol. I mean, this is showing that it wasn't just Trump, rousing the crowd up and sort of the cult aspect of this. This is an actual, as you guys put it, like a war room, a calculated set of meetings.
Yes, and phone calls and agitation. Of course, there's no better agitator than Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
And we talked recently with a former Republican head of the criminal division in the Justice Department, who said there is a lay-down case just in what we know. It's 18 U.S. Code Section 371. I'm sorry, this sounds technical, but it is a law that says it is a crime to defraud the government in any deceptive way. And that's exactly what they did here.
And that's what we're trying to understand. What's next for Merrick Garland, the Attorney General? Is there going to be a special counsel, especially if Congress can't force Bannon to testify? A lot of unanswered questions about what else don't we know about Trump's activity that night, talking to Bannon, talking to Giuliani. And where did these lines cross? Because remember, at that same Willard Hotel, you have a lot of Proud Boys, Oath Keepers gathered outside. I saw them in the streets that night.
Wow. Joe?
Yeah, Bob Woodward, I've talked about this once or twice before, but In 2015, when we were talking to Trump, I remember going by we, I'm talking about Meek and myself, not you and Trump. I remember going over to Trump Tower, and there had been some incident in one of his rallies. And I remember Trump saying, "My God, those people would kill for me." And when he said it, I looked closer, and, you know, it occurred to me as I walked out. I went back to the office and I talked to Mika. I said, I told her what he said, and then I said, I think he saw that as a positive thing, and told her how, you know, how frightening it was that and then you see this scene 5 years later where he knocks open the doors in the White House and the mob is chanting over at the Willard. Everybody's freezing inside, and there's Trump, as you all write, just soaking it in. People shivering. He won't close the doors because he loves the mob. He loves the mob violence.
And it's just not the mob, and it's not just violence here. It is to a purpose, as we quote Bannon in our book, saying this is all designed to kill the Biden presidency in the crib. This is a disruption of the function of government. And if you get into the technicalities of this, January 6th is so important. It's the only cog in the wheel where the government officially says this is who's going to be the next president. Bannon and Trump realized this is the point that they have to blow it up, and that's exactly what they did. And so you can't run away from the consequences of what this was, and you get John Eastman in his memo, in his theory of the case here, and it really is, let's make it up. And one of the elements in 371 is knowing what you're saying is wrong and false. And of course, you've got Eastman out there saying there's 7 states with alternative electors, and there are 0 when you look at it. And we spent months looking.
And yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm curious to the code that Bob Woodward cited. Who in this sort of scheme that you've uncovered, the actual events, the meeting at the Willard, who's accountable beyond the man who holds the highest office in the land, President Trump? I mean, who could be held accountable in this type of thing to that code that you cited? Well,
first of all, the law and the crime is 2 people conspiring, 2 or more, to defeat the purpose or the responsibility of the government here. And so you have Trump and Bannon. Now, Trump's president at this moment. And I remember too vividly in 1974 when they had this problem with Nixon, they made him an unindicted co-conspirator. And so you've got all of these participants in this. And it's not that it's vague. It's very direct.
Clear. Yeah.
Let's kill. I mean, if we're going to have a democracy, and we do, you can't have one side, the losing side, in a presidential election say, now let's work and conspire and deceive.
And that quote, kill the Biden presidency in the crib, it can sound almost swaggering and too much, but think about the intent behind it. They are all working, Giuliani, Eastman, Trump, to try to push the election to the House of Representatives, where House Republicans would likely keep Trump in power. But if they can't achieve that goal by either smearing the result or getting some kind of alternate electors to present themselves, they want to make it impossible for Biden to govern.
And what about Mike Pence asking questions about how he possibly could make it happen for him? Does that make him?
Well, there's all that pressure which we lay out. I mean, you are the expert on this.
We both did this together, and it's interesting to see Pence so torn the conservative Republican from Indiana, the Trump loyalist to his core. Ultimately, though, he realizes, and we don't say there are heroes in this book, they're just people recognizing that there's the Constitution of the United States, and you can't go against it.
You can't. Jonathan Lemire. Turn his ball.
Bannon here, and he has been in the news, shall we say, in recent weeks, held in contempt of Congress, and now there's possibility of criminal prosecution. We'll see in the coming days. So linked to us, this terrific reporting in your book on the events of January 5th, how that plays into what we're seeing unfold on Capitol Hill right now, but also how do you see going forward if Bannon will be, in fact, charged, and what sort of effect will that have, if any, on the Trump movement as it starts to revive ahead of 2024?
Well, he's confirmed publicly, Bannon, what we say in the book. And, of course, you don't know where it's going to go forward. But the elements are definitely here. Somebody make a cold case that this is a criminal conspiracy. And, I mean, just think, I mean, that it's so important, the Trump-Pence meeting in this period, where Trump holds out the invitation to power. Hey, Mike, wouldn't it just feel great? Wouldn't it be cool to have this power to decide who the next president is? And at this point, Pence will not play, but that it's in the Constitution. It's the 12th Amendment. It says the president of the Senate, who's the vice president, we forget this, will look at the certificates of the states and count the votes. That's it.
All right.